Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's show, we take a look at some of the strangest encounters and scariest sightings from around the world, and of course in the USA, deep in the forests and out in the wild wilderness. As ever guys, please do let me know down below in the comments what you think. As ever, please do like and share. If you haven't subscribed, smash the subscribe button, and why not kick the notification bell to stay up to date with all DMT content. Without further ado, let's get into tonight's first story, entitled 100 Years Old. This story has been passed down in our family for a while now, and it always kept me up at night knowing that this happened to my great-grandfather. To give light on the history of my dad's side of things, he is from Russia. His family has been in many wars, from the Crimean War to the Russo-Japanese War, and up to World War I and II. Now, onto the story that I was told the other day. This story takes place during World War I on the Eastern Front. It was during summer of 1916, during the Brusilov offensive. The specific date this took place was on July 26th, a month after the battle started. My great-grandfather was an aviator for the 2nd Corps Aviation Detachment, flying an SPAD S.7 French plane. The plane's tasked to have bomber planes destroy a series of houses containing ammunition for the German and Austro-Hungarian infantry. The only problem was that there was a dozen or so 8.8cm Flak 16 anti-air guns surrounding an area that was about 15 kilometres from their front line. After an hour or so of mission briefing, everyone took off into the sky. I must add that this biplane he was flying has a second seat on it with a Lewis machine gun, so he had a buddy always watching his back during a dogfight. Things were quiet after a while, until one of the bombers was being shot at by an enemy plane fire. A dogfight ensued between both sides. After shooting down 2 or 3 planes, my grandfather and his friend were hit, and were going down about 10 kilometres north of where Allies or civilization were. The plane fell down a shallow ravine, and they had both landed in a tree close to the ground. "Thank God we would have died if not for that sturdiness of that tree," my grandfather said. "At least we were able to jump before the aeroplane crashed. Let's just hope the map and the other equipment made it out," his friend Mikhail said. After a while of digging around, they found things they needed. A canteen, 2 Russian lever-action rifles, 2 Nagant revolvers, knives and a compass, and of course a map of the area. They had a large bag of ammunition for both, about 250 rounds for both weapons. The area they landed in was heavily wooded, and the closest city on the map was Riga, which was under German-Prussian control, though there was some Allied force there. It was the afternoon, around 6 or 7 p.m. in the day, and they had started to walk for a good 3 hours or so. While they were on their walk, they kept hearing things around them. "Mikhail, what's that noise?" my grandfather asked. "Ivan, it could be the enemy. Ready your weapons," Mikhail said. They had previously heard the forest brimming with life and sounds of birds and deer running around, but this made everything go dead quiet. So quiet, and then a rock suddenly hit the tree closest to them. Being mistaken for gunfire, both men hit the ground and aimed around for their assailants. They didn't see anyone, but they could hear loud footsteps across the creek that they had crossed. There they laid for almost 10 minutes, while Mikhail suddenly went white at what he saw. "Mikhail?" No response, just silence. "Mikhail, what the hell do you see?" My grandfather was supposedly a man of steel, afraid of nothing, but what he saw that day made him want to run for his life. Sitting on a rock around 98 feet away was something so dark that it was out of place from everything else. This thing was eating something. It was eating the corpse of a German soldier who got lost. Mikhail was so afraid that he started to shake and accidentally fired his gun. The large figure jumped off the rock and looked around. It began walking towards the creek. And once it got closer, it stared both of them dead in the eyes and made the most horrible noise. Ivor must have shot it somewhere along the line because the thing recoiled and held part of its body. He did see blood on the rocks, and both of them didn't waste time and ran off, and after a while They did make it to a small village. After about a year after that experience, Both men left military service and moved to the bigger cities, though they were caught in the mess of the Civil War. This was one story I'll always remember as long as I live. Edit. I will be posting another story soon, since I have the diary he kept throughout his travels. The Montana Forest. Let's get straight into that. This is my first story. Please, sit back and enjoy. To start with this story, I'm a 21-year-old volunteer forest ranger who lived in the wilds of Montana all my life. So I've seen scary things, and I've experienced the worst nightmares Mother Nature has created. Black bears, mountain lions, moose, that type of thing. I thought I'd have seen it all, but there's an experience that changed my life forever. Knowing that I'm surrounded by mountains and lush forests, I'm an avid hiker and try my best to get out every day. I have a wide understanding of wilderness survival and how to provide for myself. So, for the second time in my life, I decided to hike an hour into the remote forest near my town until all I saw around me were trees. I liked the spot and decided it would be where I'd settle. Knowing that bears were potentially in my area, I came prepared with a hunting rifle my grandfather gave to me, and a pistol. It's a little bit overboard, but I also carried a large machete and a pocket knife on me. Needless to say, it was a heavy walk and I was pretty exhausted. So, my first priority was setting up my tent around 5 PM. It took 30 minutes to set up, but I was finally comfortable and settled in and decided to lie a blanket on the rough forest landscape so I had somewhere to sit back and drink a couple of beers while slowly building upon a fire. I gathered firewood from nearby areas and dry brush that I could find. I got a fire set up around 7:30 and sat outside carefully listening to the sounds of nature. Birds whistling, sticks crackling, animals making various sounds. Eventually, night started to fall over, so I let the fire die down, and admittedly, a little tipsy, decided to call it a night. I got in my tent and sleeping bag and fell into a deep slumber quickly, as the sounds of the earth calmed me into a trance. I woke up finally the next morning around 10 AM. I made myself some breakfast and a can of beans and some bacon, so I had enough energy to make it through another day of camping. I had enough food and water to last me around 2 weeks, so I decided that's how long I'd be out there. It didn't take long, after eating, to notice something was wrong. Initially I couldn't figure out what it was, but the feeling in my gut told me to be intimidated and fearful. I cautiously searched around my campsite for any signs of danger, and I found something that sent chills down my spine. 3 pairs of boot prints, all different sizes and shoes. This wouldn't be weird, except for the fact that I was almost an hour into the forest, in an entirely remote place without any trails or signs of human inhabitants. I eventually shrugged it off and assumed they could have stumbled upon my campsite and decided to go around as not to bother me. I soon decided I wanted to check out the area around my campsite and put on some hiking gear. I made sure to holster my pistol carefully and set out on the north of my campsite, carefully noting where it was by remembering certain landmarks. 10 minutes or so into my walk, I noticed the same footprints that I found near my tent, leading further north in a zigzagging pattern until they hit something that I can't explain. A set of stairs. Concrete. They looked as if they'd been ripped directly out of a house. They'd been built into the ground and really clean. There wasn't a speck of dirt or leaf to be found on them. Not even a screw or explanation of how they were there held together at all. There were exactly 7 of them, and they led nowhere. As I started to get closer to examine and try to make sense of what I was seeing, I noticed that I couldn't hear a sound. Just an ear-piercing silence, and no wind and no animals. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I was about to take a solid step onto the first stair. I quickly moved my foot back as a foreboding feeling overcame me and told me not to touch them. The footprints ended at the stairs, and not a trace of life was seen anywhere nearby. I decided to promptly start walking back to my camp. I was back by 1 PM, drained by the walk and trying to comprehend what I saw. By the time I was back to my tent, I noticed that the footprints I saw when I woke up were entirely gone, like they were never there in the first place. At this point I was trying not to crap my pants and calm myself down by coming up with logical reasons for everything that I'd seen. Eventually this worked, and I decided to brave it out and make sure I wasn't just imagining things. So I walked back in the direction of the stairs that I found previously and got back into the area where they should have been. They weren't there anymore, but the footprints remained. This should have calmed me down, but all it did was worsen things to an intense degree. My breathing rate increased as I stood baffled by what I'd just seen, and I felt like I was being watched by something. I searched all around for an answer, yet there was nothing. I stood in silence, trying to regain my sanity in the silence for 5 minutes, until I heard a stick crackle to my left. I moved my head as fast as possible, and I saw a man with a rough beard, torn shirt, jeans, and steel-toed boots. His forehead appeared to be bloody, and he looked into my eyes without saying a word. I was staring at his face in disbelief. Why is somebody else way out here with me? It took me a moment to snap out of it, and upon closer examination, I noticed the man was carrying an axe that seemed to be dripping with some sort of fluid that of course looked to be like blood. Again, the man didn't say a word as I looked him up and then down. I only motioned to me with his hand to follow him. Obviously I didn't. I reached for my holster, feeling as if my life was in danger, and felt my heart sink into my stomach as I realised I'd left it at my camp. At this point, my fight or flight instincts kicked in. I turned around and ran like Usain Bolt, ignoring sticker bushes, bark cutting me and losing one of my shoes. I could feel my bare feet hitting the rough ground, sticks digging into me and rocks puncturing the sole of my foot. I wasn't paying attention to the direction I was running in, but eventually I lost the man. I finally stopped running and looked around in an unfamiliar area, realising how screwed I was. I didn't have a phone or a GPS on me, and the only way to find my camp was to backtrack, hoping that I could remember where I'd been as an adrenaline was pumping through my veins like river water. I started to backtrack to eventually made my way back to camp again, thanking God that my brain didn't let me down. Right off the bat, I noticed something was wrong. I frantically searched my campsite for my firearms and they were gone. There was no trace of them, and no proof that anyone could have dropped by my camp to steal them. I sat down on the forest floor contemplating what my next move would be, realising that for the sake of my safety, it would be best to leave. I felt like if I didn't, then I wouldn't be leaving at all. As it was growing late, I realised that I would have to rough it one more night before I could pack up and take the dangerous hike back to my car. I sat by my fire until 12 a.m, jumping at every sound I was hearing. I felt defenceless, no weapons, and no one else with me to overbear a potential attacker. Armed with only my fists and voice, I climbed inside my tent and lay down for about an hour before I could fall asleep. I was awoken in the middle of the night by snapping of twigs from every direction around my tent. There were voices too, saying things that I couldn't quite make out because my brain wasn't fully awake. I froze, listening to the individual voices and waiting, feeling like I was going through the last few seconds of a life. The footsteps all stopped in unison as I tried to quietly unzip myself out of my sleeping bag. A man with a deep voice said something in a language that sounded like Latin. I made out the word Satanica and knew that whatever happened to me next would be no good. I waited and waited for any other sounds but didn't hear anything for 20 minutes. At this point, I decided to brave out the night and peek outside. I could see that nobody was around anymore as my fire was still dimly lit. If it weren't for my fire, I wouldn't see a thing, as the surrounding areas out of reach of the light seemed to be in pitch black, only illuminated by the gloomy moonlight. I made a split decision to leave my tent, food and water and get the hell out of there. I grabbed my flashlight from my tent and started to walk towards my car. I knew I had a long walk ahead of me and was prepared to see anything at any point. I grabbed a blunt stick off the ground to give me a sense of protection. It was just a branch and didn't really make me feel any safer. I was close to my car and I heard the heavy sounds of footprints behind me, around me. Not one, but what sounded like a stampede. They were chanting things like pig, whore and other disturbing slurs, and they looked to be around 10 people. I saw the man with an axe behind me running in my direction and then 10 people catching up to him. They were dressed in robes and saying,
"You've seen too much. Your friends had to be put down and now you'll die."
They closed in on the man and I saw him get entirely overwhelmed by the force of them. They were shouting,
"The stairs pave the way to hell. Our Lord welcomes you."
The Axeman was screaming the most horrific and blood-curdling scream I've ever heard in my life, until it was muffled and then completely gone. I felt so bad that I couldn't help him. I couldn't do a single thing to save him. I eventually made it to my car and put it into reverse and flew out of the area. noticing that the two of the men in the red blotched robes, which were previously white, waving goodbye. As soon as I was out of there, I found the nearest police station and begged them to search the area extensively. They told me that the three men had recently gone missing in the area I camped. They loaded up all their small town officers into vehicles with shotguns in hand, clearly scared, and followed me to the spot where I was. They went into forest, asking if I could direct them to any places where I witnessed things. On the way to the crime scene, some of the officers asked if I witnessed anything else that was strange on the trip, and I told them about the stairs. They all stopped, and the leading officer told the others to turn around. A young officer tried to question it and got snapped at. They all promptly listened with looks of despair on their faces and told me to leave the area, asked for my contact information. We all left, and on my way home, all I could think about were the screams of that man as he took his final breaths. About a week after this all took place, I got a knock on my door. It was one of the officers that was with me that night. He told me 3 bodies had been found completely mutilated and strung up on trees and rocks. Some body parts were even 40 to 90 feet in the air, and the causes of their deaths could never be determined. To this day, I can't explain the events that transpired, and I still have nightmares every time I sleep of the men in the hooded robes. I still ask people about the stairs, and they go quiet and tell me not to worry. There's not a single day that goes by that I don't see the face of the man who was so desperately needing my help. Every night at my house, I hear 3 taps on my window, except no one is outside. Only a pair of 2 large hoof prints in the same spot every morning that never seem to go away. Although this is where the story ends, it seems mine is just beginning. Soon I will die with no physical explanation. My limbs will hang from trees, and my body will be unidentifiable. If you're seeing this, don't go into the woods in Montana. Don't approach stairs in the wilderness. Don't make the same mistakes that I did, because they cost me my life. God save me. Giant in the night. I live on a very large property on the mountains. It was actually used for an amusement park before it was a house. I have a nice view of the city from up here. It's exceptionally scenic. With such a large property, it's easy for my landscaping to get out of control, so I usually hire people to maintain it. One day in August, my usual guy was on vacation, so I got another guy to work for me. He showed up around 1 PM and got right to work. About an hour later, I hear a knock at my door. I go to answer and it's the guy. He told me that he found something I might want to take a look at. So, I followed him into my backyard to where the tree line began. He pointed to the ground and I saw a set of enormous footprints. I knew that they couldn't be a bear. Heck, I don't even think Bigfoot could make tracks that big. We both sat there and stared at them for a moment. I asked him if he had any idea what it could have been, and he just shook his head. With that, I went back inside and he went back to mowing the lawn. He finished up really quick. I think he was a little scared. After the incident with the footprints, I was unnerved, so I began to search the web for answers. Nothing that I found matched what I saw though. I continued my quest for knowledge until around 9 o'clock at night. I then heard something like a loud crash. I rose up from my chair and went to my patio. I searched around my yard to see what it had made that noise. And then I saw it. An entire tree had been uprooted from the ground. This wasn't a sapling or a dead tree. It was about 20 feet tall and very much healthy. I got weirded out by this and I hadn't the faintest idea as to why this tree had fallen down suddenly. There was no wind at all that night. I retired to my bed and tried to drift off to sleep, but my mind was a mess with all kinds of thoughts. Eventually, I tired myself out and finally drifted off into sleep. In the morning, I stepped outside onto my patio and my jaw dropped. My entire yard had been ransacked. Trees had been ripped out of the ground and my lawn had been torn up. And then I noticed the footprints, the same footprints that I'd seen the day before. At that point, I called the police. An officer arrived at my house and looked around in awe. He told me that some kids really had some time on their hands to do all this. I stood there, confused. I asked him if he really thought that kids could do this, and he just said that what else could it have been? He filed a report and left. The rest of the day was pretty much mundane and uneventful. I would occasionally stare at my destroyed lawn and sigh, thinking about how much it was going to cost me to fix it. Then, At 7 o'clock, something got my attention. I got up to look at my lawn one last time when I heard the most awful roar come from the woods. It sounded like a lion crossed with a bear and with a little bit of a howler monkey mixed in. I froze in fear for a moment before making my way onto the patio. There, I saw it. A massive black creature with long arms and legs. I estimated it was about 17 feet tall. It looked almost like King Kong, but without any hair. Its eyes glowed a piercing orange glow. I was frozen with fear. A few minutes later, the creature began to move towards my house, and it noticed me. I mustered all of my will, and I charged inside. It roared again, and I slammed into the side of my house. I thought that it was going to break through the wall, so I hid in a closet in the kitchen. To my surprise, it did not attack again. But I stood in that closet for the rest of the night. I haven't seen the monster again since then. But every so often, a neighbour would tell me about a tree or two that had mysteriously been torn from the ground. The strange light in the woods. I can't explain. Let's get straight into that. A while back I wrote a story about a strange sound in the woods. I've not been here in a really long time, so don't know exactly when that happened. This time, it was different. It was back in December, 18th to be exact, 2016. I was out with my brother and we had just gotten home. I don't remember what exactly we were doing. I just remember getting out of the SUV and looking up at the sky. I don't know why I looked up. I just had this weird feeling. My brother called to me and said, "What are you looking at?" I shook my head. "I don't know. The star is acting weird." I pointed it out to him. In fact, the light was acting strange. It was moving, or at least it looked like it. The weird thing is that at night I didn't see any other stars in the sky. It was just the one. The light was moving up and down and not acting like a star should. It was then that I went in to get my camera. My brother was wondering why. "It's just a star." I told him no, this was different. I don't know why, it felt strange, like all the sound was sucked out. It didn't feel normal. So I went back out and started to film the star. I thought I was putting my camera up at the sky. It was around 8 PM and really dark out. I started talking and going on about the light and how strange it was acting. Then I looked down where I was pointing the camera and realised, in fact, I wasn't filming the sky. Instead, I was filming the woods and realised there was a light in the woods. So I looked at the viewfinder and saw a light there on the camera. I realised, holy crap, what the hell is this I'm seeing? What's even more strange is that I couldn't see the light when I looked where the camera was pointing. It was only through the viewfinder I could see the light. I swear, I felt as if I was being watched. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I was watching the woods through my camera. I was really freaked out. I have no idea what it was, if it was nothing more than a light or reflection. After some point a truck drove and the light vanished. It was gone. Suddenly the sound had returned and I realised I was holding my breath. I was a bit scared at this point, and then my brother came and got me. I came back in, shaken up by what had happened. It was then that I reviewed the footage. What I saw can't be explained. I have no idea what happened, but the video was corrupt. I watched it and uploaded it to YouTube. I warned, turned it down, because it's very loud. I don't know if I can share it on here, but I'm still confused by what it was and what happened. My brother thinks it was nothing. I didn't think so. Not how I felt that night. After the video went up, nothing has happened since then. In fact, the woods are gone now. The apartments or whoever owned the land has cleared out the woods and everything that was there. The woods are gone now, and I never experienced anything like that since then. To this day, I will go back and watch the video again. I looked over my camera and found it was working correctly as it should. I recorded a few videos after in case to see if it was working okay. The camera does record videos, but every once in a while, for no reason, the video becomes corrupt, and it wasn't doing this before. It only started doing it after this event. I rarely use the camera to record anything anymore because of this. I have no idea of how to figure out what's wrong with it, and I still don't know why or what happened to this day. It still confuses me, and I'm curious as what exactly could have happened that night. Run. Let's get straight into that. Every summer since I was little, my family has spent most of August in a cabin we own in the woods. It's not exactly a kid's ideal vacation, considering there's no TV or video games, but we make do. It's been a family tradition for years, so after my parents died, I inherited the cabin, and it was a welcome surprise considering I'd always loved exploring the woods, even though I'd missed a lack of electronic entertainment. As part of the handling of their estate, I decided to spend a week in the cabin, getting it ready for my siblings when they showed up for the annual retreat the week after. It took me hours every day, and my body was so sore, but I was finally finished. Everything was perfect, just like I remembered. My brother and sister would have their best retreat yet. In memory of my mum and dad, I decided to stay with them, kind of a family morning thing. They arrived on a Friday evening around 7 p.m. My brother in his fancy car, and my sister in her Jeep. She'd brought her new boyfriend with her. Even though this was supposed to be a family only, when I mentioned it, she told me to stop being uptight, my brother backing her up. Thankfully, I prepared plenty, so there was enough for our unexpected guest. We had a barbecue night that night, sitting around a fire while we ate. My sister was too wrapped up in hugging her new boyfriend to even talk to me, and my brother was griping on about a lack of cell service. Definitely not how I imagined this weekend starting. The next morning, my sister's boyfriend was gone. No trace left behind. She spent all day yelling for him and searching in the woods, trying to find him. His stuff was left behind, but he was just gone. Such a shame too. Despite being uninvited, he was a nice guy. He even apologised for intruding on a family thing. That night, I made a barbecue again. Dad had taught me how to make an amazing sauce and how to grill the meat just right so it was tender and falling off the bone. My sister only had a little bit, since she was still worried about her boyfriend. I told her not to worry. He'd probably got on board and left. It wasn't too far to walk, after all. Maybe an hour walk. Come Sunday morning, my brother was gone too, like the boyfriend. All of his stuff still there, but he wasn't. By now, my sister was hysterical, worrying that somebody had kidnapped them. I told her she was being absurd, that they were too close to town, and even then, the place had been locked up. Still, we spent all day looking, and to no avail. The last of the barbecue was all gone that night. Monday morning, I was the only one left, whistling softly as I made breakfast. I ate in peace, enjoying the solitude. Once I'd finished and washed up the dishes, I decided it was time. Moving a large rug aside in the living room, I unlocked the door to the cellar, walking down the stairs with a little hop in my step. After all, I was in a good mood, so why not be a little silly? In the cellar, I rounded the corner to where I chained up my siblings. The boyfriend's remains laid on a table before them. I'm sure he would have been happy to know you liked the barbecue. Such a sweet guy. I barely had a reason to season him at all. Opening a cupboard, I pulled out a pistol holster, locking it into place, sliding a handgun in. I pulled out a rifle next, slinging it over my shoulder. I tossed the keys to my brother, stopping to take a bite from the boyfriend. I'd really outdone myself with that sauce. Looking back to my siblings, I laughed softly, pulling the rifle into my hands. Run. I headed up the stairs after that, leaving the cellar door open. Sure, they could try to get in their cars and run for it. My brother did. Saved me the trouble of putting him on the grill. Dad was right though. Fear makes the meat tender. Might explain why he and Mum tasted so good. But my sister, she's no woodsman. Or would that be woodswoman? Doesn't matter. She'll do fine when my brother's leftovers are gone. Dinner is much more fun when it runs. Wow. Hope you guys enjoyed those strange and peculiar and terrifying encounters there. Please, of course, do let me know down below in the comments As ever, please do share and like. If you haven't subscribed to DMT, smash the subscribe button and again kick the notification bell to stay up to date with all DMT content. We have some fantastic stuff coming up over the next few weeks. Been holding out on you guys with some true Dogman encounters and various other cryptids. Got quite a lot of things going on in the background at the moment. Soon to be announced though. As ever guys, remember, if you're going out on a dark, rainy night, or you're in a deep, wild wilderness, keep your wits about you. And remember, above all, be safe, not sorry.